Hi, I'm Ophelia, and this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's a story about survival in plain sight. My family didn't just steal my company shares, they erased my name, one contract at a time. When I refused to disappear, my father locked me out of my own house. They thought silence would break me. But what if the quietest one is the one who saw everything and never forgot? What would you do if your family turned your life into a transaction? The evening air was thick with the scent of magnolias when I arrived at the Dorian family home. The sun had just disappeared behind the cedar trees, leaving streaks of orange and violet painted across the horizon. As the shadows lengthened, the house itself seemed to loom larger than usual. Cream-painted walls reflected the last slivers of light, and for a fleeting second, it looked like the house was tilting forward, ready to pass judgment. I paused at the end of the walkway, adjusted the hem of my blouse, and smoothed invisible wrinkles from my blazer. My chest rose and fell in slow, measured breaths. I had been here countless times before, but tonight was different. The invitation had come last minute, wrapped in casual language that hinted at something more formal. "Just dinner," Callista had said. Yet even as I stepped onto the porch, I knew that just dinner in this house rarely meant what it seemed. The door opened easily. Inside, the familiar foyer stretched before me, polished wood floors gleaming, the faint fragrance of lemon polish lingering in the air. Beyond the archway, I heard the muffled symphony of silverware against china, soft laughter, and the gentle murmur of voices. For a moment, I stood at the threshold, unwilling to move. Finally, I stepped forward, heels clicking softly, each step echoing louder than it should have. The dining room was already alive with warmth, the glow of a crystal chandelier overhead, the rich sheen of mahogany furniture polished within an inch of its life, the long table set with meticulous precision. Silver candlesticks flickered in rhythm with the hushed conversations. And then I saw it. My name card, not near the head of the table, not even halfway down, but at the farthest end, tucked into the corner like an afterthought, wedged against the wall where even the servants might have hesitated to place a guest. My throat tightened. I looked at the center of the table where Callista sat radiant, her card positioned proudly at the heart of it all, the seat of honor, the very axis around which the room's energy turned. I slipped into my place quietly, pretending not to notice the shift in conversation that accompanied my arrival. Chairs scraped faintly. A cousin glanced, then quickly turned away. I forced my lips into a polite curve, searching for something soft, something human in the room. My eyes found Meliora. For half a heartbeat, I thought she might hold my gaze. Instead, her eyes slid past me as though I were part of the wallpaper. The first course arrived, salad, lightly dressed, plated with surgical precision. I focused on the bitter greens, the delicate vinaigrette, anything to ground myself. The air around me thickened as Callista began speaking. "Quarter 4 exceeded projections," she said, with a measured calm that almost disguised her hunger. "The client praised our leadership transition, said it was the smoothest they've seen in a decade." Dorian, seated near the head of the table, leaned forward eagerly. His voice carried the authority of verdict. "Callista has really elevated our public image. She's become the face of our expansion." The words fell heavy in my chest. I forced down a bite of salad, my mind buzzing with metrics I had spent weeks compiling, the roadmaps I had designed in solitude while the others slept. I had been the scaffolding to Callista's image, but in this moment, I was invisible. Meliora passed the breadbasket without looking at me. Her silence wasn't absence, it was deliberate. I wanted to shatter it with something, anything. My voice slipped out, brittle but steady. "The vinaigrette is exceptional, Mom." She didn't answer, not even a flicker of acknowledgement. The only sound was the clink of her fork against porcelain. Callista's smile curved, perfectly polite, perfectly cruel. "Ophelia helped with the campaign design last spring," she said, turning to a cluster of cousins. "Though it's nice to be able to focus on forward-facing work now." Helped, not led, not created. Helped. As if my countless nights rewriting proposals, debugging systems, and stabilizing servers were nothing more than a passing favor. My lips pressed tight, sealing the words I wanted to hurl across the table. The wine arrived, ruby red, fragrant with oak. I poured a glass, fingers trembling only slightly, and lifted it to my lips. The taste was sharp, almost metallic. I let it linger on my tongue as the ache in my chest grew heavier. Images flickered in my mind, nights hunched over my laptop, days spent smoothing chaos before it reached Callista's desk. I remembered coding through sunrise, fixing what she broke, shielding her from the fallout, all invisible, always invisible. Then Dorian cleared his throat. The sound silenced the room. He rose, his stature filling the space, and in his hand was a sleek leather folder. My stomach tightened. "This," he said, voice calm, practiced, "is just a formality." The folder landed in front of me with a dull thud that seemed to reverberate off the walls. I stared at it, the scent of leather sharp in my nose. He continued, "We'd like you to sign a temporary transfer agreement, so Callista can manage some expansion projects in your stead." The words echoed like a sentence passed. My fingers hovered above the folder. I didn't need to open it. I knew what it was. Not a formality. Not temporary. It was erasure wrapped in legal jargon. Callista's fork rested gently against her plate. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes betrayed the faintest flicker of anticipation. Meliora's face was a mask of composure, revealing nothing, yet offering me no refuge. The room seemed to lean closer, waiting. The pen glinted in Dorian's hand, silver and sharp. He extended it toward me. "Just sign," he said softly. My hand reached, not for the pen, but for the folder. I placed my palm on its cover, feeling its cold firmness under my skin. My breath came slow, deliberate. Every muscle in my body screamed to protest, to hurl the pen across the room, to call them thieves in their own house. But I didn't, not yet. At last, I lifted my chin. My voice emerged quiet, but firm enough to cut the silence. "I need time." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Dorian's jaw tightened. "That's disappointing, Ophelia." The words settled like a gavel's strike. Silence swallowed the room. No one rushed to defend me. No one challenged him. Even the candles seemed to flicker lower, shadows stretching across the cream-colored walls. I sat at the farthest end of the table, my hand still pressed against the folder. My voice was small, but it was mine, and for the first time that evening, it was enough. The first light of dawn broke in pale gold across the horizon, and with it came the chill that settled deep into my bones. I stood once again before the front door of the Dorian house, coffee clutched in one trembling hand, the other tightening into a fist as if bracing against the blow I already sensed was coming. The house looked the same as always, quiet, dignified, framed by magnolia trees that dripped with dew. To a stranger, it might have seemed peaceful, welcoming even. But to me, standing on that porch, the house felt like a sentinel, a fortress that had already decided I no longer belonged. I wrapped my fingers around the brass doorknob, the cool metal biting into my palm. I turned it gently. Nothing. The lock resisted, firm and deliberate. I tried again, harder this time, but it refused to yield. The click echoed through the still morning air, an unmistakable verdict. I was locked out. The truth slammed into me like a blunt object. My breath stuttered, caught in my throat, and for a long moment, I simply stared at the door as if sheer will might undo it. This was the same threshold I had crossed 1,000 times before. Through this door, I had carried stacks of reports for late-night reviews, tiptoed in after 18-hour days, arrived for Christmas mornings and birthdays and fights and reconciliations. This door had always opened, until now. I stepped back slowly, my heart pounding like a drum inside my chest. My phone buzzed in my hand. A single message lit up the screen. I read it once, then twice, and then a third time, the words sinking deeper each time like stones thrown into a lake. "Until you're ready to act in the family's best interest, this house is no longer your home." Signed, Dad. I felt the heat rise in my face, and then the cold. My fingers quivered, tightening around the phone as if squeezing it might break the sentence apart. one sentence, and everything I had built, everything I had poured into this family, was erased. I leaned against the porch column, the wood rough against my shoulder, and closed my eyes. I drew in a shaky breath and tasted nothing but grit and betrayal. Desperation clawed at me. I dialed my mother. The line rang once, twice, and then slipped into voicemail. I called again. The same. I texted, "Mom, are you okay? Why silence?" No reply. Her absence was louder than any words. For years, I had convinced myself she was caught in the middle, that she was neutral, that she didn't choose sides. But in truth, there had never been a middle ground. Her silence was a side. It was abandonment dressed in hesitation. My mind slipped back unbidden, dragging me to another night years ago when I was 17, the night of my high school prom. While others laughed and danced beneath glittering lights, I had been in the garage, crouched over a stack of drafts, helping Dad finish a presentation he swore couldn't wait until morning. I told myself it was a sacrifice worth making, that someday he would remember, that my absence at that rite of passage would mean something, but no one called to ask if I was okay. No one noticed I wasn't there. I sat on the cold cement floor under the weak glow of a single bulb and cried into my sleeve, my tears falling unheard. That night, like this one, my needs had been swallowed by theirs. Now, standing on the porch of the house I had once believed was mine too, that same hollow ache gnawed at me. I turned away, crossing the lawn in stiff mechanical steps until I reached my car. I sat in the driver's seat with my hands slack in my lap, staring through the windshield at the house that had cast me out. The windows were shuttered, blinds drawn tight as if the house itself had closed its eyes to me. The air inside the car was cold against my cheeks, sharp and bracing. I unlocked my phone again and checked my company account. A notification blinked back at me. No such user. I refreshed the page. Again. No such user. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, nails digging into the leather. They hadn't just locked me out of the house. They had locked me out of the system I had built with my own hands. I checked my bank app next. The joint account I once shared was inaccessible. My login bounced. My name, once tied to every project, every ledger, every credit line, they had erased it all in a single night. I sat in silence, letting the weight of it crush me for a long moment. Then something steadier began to rise. The ache hardened. Betrayal sharpened into calculation. Locking me out would leave traces. They could shut the door in my face, but every move left a record. Digital logs of altered permissions, timestamps of revoked emails, backups of every transaction, every audit trail. My mind began organizing it like an equation. Server access, backups, contract revisions, whistleblowers. I picked up my notebook from the passenger seat and began scribbling mental notes onto paper, my pen pressing hard against the page until the ink bled through. Check server logs, pull archives, request financial backups. I lifted my eyes to the house once more. The blinds stared back like closed eyelids. The flags of family unity had been lowered. I had lost everything in a single morning, my home, my standing, my illusion of belonging. And yet, as the sun climbed higher above the cedar trees, a whisper stirred within me, a whisper that rose until it became a vow. I will be heard. The words tasted like iron on my tongue. I turned the key in the ignition, the engine roaring to life beneath my hands. I didn't drive aimlessly. I didn't let grief dictate my route. I drove toward my short-term apartment downtown, my jaw set, my body straight in the seat. The battle was not over. It was only just beginning. I didn't step into the stale air of that borrowed apartment until nearly mid-morning, and even then the space felt foreign, like a waiting room for someone else's life. The faint hum of distant traffic rose through the open window, muted by the steady rhythm of rain gutters draining onto concrete. Nothing in this room was truly mine. Secondhand furniture, mismatched curtains, a rug that smelled faintly of dust and pine cleaner. Still, I sat on the edge of the couch, clutching my smartphone like it might either save me or finish me off. The notification banner pulsed across my screen. Live Now, Business Insight Podcast with Callista Dorian. Against my better judgment, I tapped it. Her voice flowed through the speaker with the kind of practiced ease only years of curated applause could build. Confident, polished, dripping with certainty. The host's introduction was all silk and flattery. Today, we have the visionary leader herself. With her father's unwavering support, she has transformed the company's image and future. Callista, welcome. Callista laughed lightly, her tone both humble and triumphant. Thank you. It's been an incredible journey. My heart locked in my chest. It felt as if someone had draped a cloak of erasure over me, heavy and suffocating. I had prepared myself for this, hadn't I? I knew she would spin the narrative, that she would step into the spotlight with the same audacity she'd always wielded. But hearing her claim full ownership of years of work that weren't hers, it sliced sharper than betrayal. It was annihilation dressed as applause. The podcast rolled on, her voice weaving carefully scripted anecdotes about late nights of leadership and creative vision. Every detail she described, I remembered living myself. The 2 a.m. troubleshooting calls, the endless coding marathons, the quiet fixes to save projects from collapsing. Yet in her telling, I had never existed. The audience clapped. The host praised her resilience. My own breath caught in my throat, jagged and raw. The thin walls of the apartment seemed to vibrate with every syllable she uttered. I dropped the phone onto the couch cushions. The slip of plastic startled me as it bounced, thudding into the floor. I rose abruptly, pacing the length of the narrow living room, my bare feet dragging across the worn carpet. Rage churned beneath my skin. Each step replayed scenes I had shoved into the shadows. The night I fell asleep at my desk, cheek pressed against half-finished code, coffee long gone cold, while Callista swept into the office at sunrise, hair perfectly curled, heels clicking, snapping photos for the press release. The day of the big launch when I had patched bugs for 16 hours straight, my hands trembling, my brain fogged, and she arrived at the 11th hour to cut the ribbon and smile for the cameras. The moment Dad patted her on the shoulder in front of the team and declared it a true family victory. He didn't even glance at me. Team victory meant her face, not my work. The memories punched through me like fists. I pressed my palms against my temples, whispering into the silence. What was I ever to them? A ghost with a W-2? Tears blurred my vision, but these weren't the hot tears of defeat. They burned like fuel, igniting something far more dangerous than sorrow. I reached for my phone again, thumbs shaking as I typed a message. You lied about me. You erased me. You'll regret it. But I didn't hit send. What good were empty words against a machine that thrived on curated narratives and applause? Instead, I dragged open my laptop and ripped through my drafts folder. Contracts, emails, internal memos, expense sheets, evidence, all the invisible scaffolding of their so-called empire. Proof that I wasn't a ghost. I had existed on paper, time-stamped and undeniable. The dim apartment light glowed across my keyboard. That's when I realized. I didn't need threats. I needed facts. My thumb hovered over one name in my contacts. Astria. I hadn't spoken to her in years. She had been the only one at the company willing to stand up to Callista when adjustments to the financial disclosures had begun. For that, she'd been pushed out, fired and smeared as unstable. I had admired her courage silently, too afraid then to back her. Now, she was the only ally I could imagine calling. I dialed. The ring dragged on, stretching the seconds. Just as I thought it would click into voicemail, a voice answered, steady, familiar, with the faintest edge of disbelief. Ophelia? My throat tightened. I cleared it, forcing steadiness into my tone. It's me. I need your help. A pause stretched, carrying the weight of years we hadn't spoken. Then came her reply, quiet and decisive. Okay, I'll see you. Relief washed through me, jagged but real. Half relief, half war. We met that afternoon in a small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a florist. The windows spilled soft golden light across wooden tables. The air smelled of ground coffee and ink, a blend that carried me back to nights of drafting proposals in borrowed spaces. Astria sat waiting, a notebook open before her. Her once dark hair had faded to a proud silver streak, her suit immaculate but unpretentious. She rose when I approached, greeting me not with surprise, but with the quiet steadiness of someone who had expected this day would eventually come. "You finally ready to stop being the good daughter?" she asked, her eyes piercing but not unkind. I nodded, my voice unsteady but honest. They forged more than my silence. They forged my erasure. Her expression softened, but only slightly. She reached into her bag and slid a slim folder across the table. The edges were worn, the paper inside creased. Its weight against my palms felt like both proof and challenge. I opened it. Inside lay memos, emails, internal notes, documents with my name attached, evidence that I had been present, active, vital. Time-stamped. Dated. Facts that couldn't be washed away by speeches or podcasts. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the hot sting of vindication. My chest tightened. I wanted to say so much, to rage, to weep, to confess. Instead, I whispered, "Then I want to be heard, loudly." Astria studied me, her gaze sharp. "We'll start tomorrow," she said, her tone final. Outside, the wind shifted, rattling the cafe windows. For the first time in days, the pressure inside my chest eased slightly. Not completely, just enough to breathe. But I knew, with a certainty that burned through my veins, this was only the beginning. That afternoon, I sat in the corner booth of the cafe, the kind of place that pretended at calm with soft jazz and watered-down sunlight. Outside, the world looked unsettled. A thin veil of clouds drifted lazily across the Texas sky, their shadows moving over the street like dark thoughts no one wanted to name. From my seat, I could see the reflection of those clouds ripple across the glass tabletop. My fork nudged a bowl of rice salad, something simple, deliberately chosen so I wouldn't fumble with a knife or dessert spoon while navigating what I knew was coming. The waitress refilled my water glass with the kind of cheerful indifference that belonged to someone who had no idea how sharp the silence at my table felt. I checked my watch. Meliora's chair sat empty. I wasn't surprised. My mother had always been deliberate about entrances, never late, never rushed, but never early either. She walked into rooms like someone entering church, quiet, controlled, always a prayer in her throat that no one would ask too much of her. When she finally appeared, her figure framed in the cafe's doorway, she wore a soft blue blouse that brought out the lighter flecks in her eyes. She looked smaller somehow, though not physically diminished. More like the years had chipped pieces off her spirit that she'd learned to cover with good manners. Her smile, faint and tight, flickered as she crossed the room. "Ophelia," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking my name out loud might conjure a fight she wasn't sure she could win. "Mom." I gave her a nod, my tone measured. "Thanks for coming." We sat. She placed her purse gently on the chair beside her, as though even her belongings needed protection. The waitress reappeared, hovering for a moment, but Meliora waved her off politely. 2 water glasses sat untouched between us. For a while we didn't speak. The cafe's sounds filled the air, clinking dishes, a dishwasher rumbling somewhere in the back, the hum of soft conversation. To me, it was all white noise, a flimsy curtain drawn over the tension pressing against my ribs. She broke first. "Your apartment. Is it okay?" I heard, "What happened?" Her voice tried for concern, but it landed fragile, like a vase already cracked. I let her question linger before answering. "It's fine. I make it home these days." I folded my napkin neatly, buying a beat of silence. "But that house isn't mine anymore. At least not in the way I believed it was." Her lips pressed together, a quick purse of disapproval, or regret. Hard to tell which. Her gaze flicked down to the table, then up again. "Your father always says he wants what's best for the family. She hesitated, searching for safety. "I just want you safe." Her words floated across the table like a fragile bridge she wanted me to walk across. I didn't move. My jaw tightened. "Safe?" I repeated, my tone cutting, though still quiet. "Safe how, Mom? By erasing me?" I leaned forward just enough for her to see the heat in my eyes. "You watched them erase me. You stood by while they redrew history with me missing, and you didn't say a word." Her breath hitched. She blinked quickly, a crack in her composure. Ophelia, I didn't mean to hurt you. Never. You know that. But it did, I said, my voice deliberate, anchoring each word. Every single time. The cafe seemed to hush around us. Somewhere, a spoon clinked against porcelain. A child laughed near the door. Yet at our table, the silence was so dense it pressed against my skin. She shook her head, her hands trembling slightly where they rested atop each other. Her eyes glassed over with tears she was too proud to let fall. I thought I was stuck between you and Dorian. I was trying to keep peace. Her voice cracked on the word peace, like even she no longer believed in it. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small card. I set it on the table between us. My new address, embossed discreetly, printed without flourish. It wasn't a plea, it was a statement. You don't have to pick sides, I told her, my tone calm but immovable. But you can't stand in my way. Not anymore. Her fingers hovered above the card, trembling as if it were a match about to burn her. But she didn't push it back toward me, and she didn't take it either. She just stared, torn between guilt and loyalty, and maybe even fear. I studied her for a moment, the woman who had once been my fiercest protector. I remembered her tucking me into bed when I was small, whispering stories of bravery into my ear. But now she sat before me, with eyes cast down, unable to defend me against the people who should never have needed defense in the first place. I rose slowly, pushing my chair back with a scrape that seemed louder than it was. My heart hammered, but my voice remained steady. Next time, I said, pausing just long enough for the words to pierce, don't call if you're going to ask me to be silent. The cafe shifted. I felt the air pull tight, the other patrons sensing something private but heavy just passed between us. Meliora's lips parted, but no words came. I turned toward the door, sunlight spilling across my face as I stepped forward. Outside, the Texas afternoon stretched wide and unforgiving. The sun had slipped past the thickest of the clouds, burning hot on my shoulders, though the air still held a coolness from the earlier shade. I inhaled deeply, tasting grit and determination on my tongue. I didn't look back. Not at her tears, not at her silence, not at the home I had already lost. The fire inside me had been ignited, and I carried it out into the light of day, knowing this was no longer about peace. It was about survival. The morning air carried an odd electricity, as though the city itself sensed something about to shift. The rising sun glinted off glass towers, and a mild breeze sent ripples through the tall banners lining the convention walkway. Each one bore the same message printed in bold, self-assured type. Visionary CEO, Callista Carter. Her face, carefully lit and retouched, smiled down at every passerby, as though the whole block had been staged for her coronation. My steps slowed only once beneath the last banner. I lifted my eyes, scanning the colors, navy blue and gold, and let my chest tighten with the weight of betrayal. She had stolen enough in private. Today she was making it public. But so was I. I adjusted the press badge clipped to my blazer. Astria's contact had secured it with surgical precision, threading my name into the attendee list without leaving a trace. When I approached security, I kept my expression calm, my breathing measured. The guard's scanner beeped, green light flashing. He nodded, waved me through. Inside, the convention hall thrummed with life. Polished shoes echoed across marble floors, high heels clicked against the tiles. People clustered in circles, badges clipped to suit pockets, lanyards swinging, champagne glasses already in hand. The scent of espresso and perfume hung heavy. Screens displayed hashtags, media logos, and sponsors. At the far end, the main stage glowed under a canopy of spotlights. Rows upon rows of seats stretched out like a cathedral, each filled with eager faces angled toward the stage. And there she was, Callista, standing tall in a tailored ivory suit, her hair swept perfectly to one side, her every gesture choreographed to suggest elegance and command. She was radiant, yes, but it was a radiance fueled by lies. I stayed at the back, half hidden by the shadow of a camera rig. My fingers tightened around my leather notebook. My pulse drummed in my ears as her voice carried across the hall. Because leadership isn't just about numbers or metrics, she declared, tone smooth as glass. It's about vision, it's about legacy, it's about family. Applause thundered. She smiled modestly, a queen feigning humility. I stiffened. The words carved into me like a knife. Vision, legacy, family. She wielded them like banners of triumph, while I stood erased at the edge of her stage. She never spoke my name, not once. I whispered to myself, barely audible, "You're rewriting history, but you can't erase it." The speech rolled on. Expansion plans, international partnerships, boundary-breaking innovation. She presented charts that I had once drawn, strategies I had once carved late into the night. She wore them like ornaments. My throat burned, but my resolve hardened. Then came the shift. The moderator, smiling with polished teeth, opened the floor for questions. Safe ones at first. Stock prices, marketing campaigns, hiring pipelines. She fielded them all effortlessly, her charm gliding across every syllable. I rose. The murmur started immediately, rippling from row to row as people noticed the figure standing near the back. A microphone was passed down the aisle, placed in my hand. I felt the weight of it, cool and metallic, as though it carried both threat and promise. "Excuse me," I said, my voice firm but calm. "Callista, can you explain where the M-line strategy originated?" A ripple of surprise ran through the crowd. Heads turned, phones tilted upward to record. On stage, her smile faltered. Just for a moment. Barely a crack, but a crack all the same. She blinked once, twice, then smoothed her features. "I developed a vision," she said evenly. "Of course, we all did our part. It was a team effort." The murmurs grew louder. A note of skepticism threaded through the applause. The moderator shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I took one step forward, raising my phone high. "Then let's show the team." My thumb pressed play. The projection screen behind her, synced to the hall's feed, flickered, then lit up with the grainy timestamp of 2017. There I stood in a conference room, hair tied back, sleeves rolled, explaining line by line the mechanics of the M-line algorithm. Engineers clustered around me, their notebooks open. The slide deck bore my name in the corner. My voice, recorded, echoed through the hall. "This is how we scale." The silence before the gasp was deafening. Then came the eruption. Gasps, murmurs, a few voices raised in shock. Cameras swiveled. Pens scratched. The moderator banged his clipboard against the table, trying to restore order. I lowered the phone, my gaze locked on hers. Her face had gone pale beneath the stage lights, her hand trembling slightly against the lectern. I spoke again, this time louder, the microphone carrying my words across every corner of the hall. "I built that. Not just part of it, not in some vague contribution. I authored it. It was my work. And you can't speak around truth and expect it to disappear." The crowd erupted again. Some clapped, others shouted questions. Reporters leaned forward in their seats, hungry. Callista opened her mouth, but no words came. Her lips parted, closed, then opened again. Nothing. She swallowed hard, her practiced composure cracking under the glare. The moderator called a recess, his voice barely rising above the din. The lights dimmed, but the damage was done. A swarm of journalists surged toward me as I stepped back from the aisle. Cameras flashed in my face, microphones extended. "Who are you?" someone demanded. "Why wasn't your name ever mentioned?" another asked. I stopped, turned to them, and allowed a small, sharp smile. "I'm the founder they forgot to mention." The words landed like a thunderclap. Reporters scribbled furiously. Someone repeated it aloud, half incredulous. "The founder they forgot to mention." In that moment, standing in the chaos, I didn't feel erased. I didn't feel silenced. I felt discovered. For the first time in years, the world had seen me. And Callista, my sister, my usurper, could no longer hide behind borrowed light. The applause still rang in my ears long after I'd left the convention center, echoing not as triumph, but as a warning. Hours later, in the quiet of my apartment, the sound of celebration had been replaced by something heavier, the low hum of my laptop, the faint rumble of cars outside on the wet street, the ticking of a cheap wall clock. I should have felt elated after tearing through Callista's facade in front of the world. I had forced her mask to crack. I had shown them proof. For the first time, the spotlight shifted, but exhilaration never came. Instead, what I felt was weight, dense, pressing, like a stone lodged deep in my chest. I stood motionless in the middle of the small living room, staring at nothing. The apartment was sparsely furnished, half temporary, half exile. A single lamp cast a pale circle of light across the folding table that had become my command center. On it sat my phone. My hand reached almost without thinking, dialing a number engraved into muscle memory. Dorian's, my father's. It rang once, twice. I held my breath. I waited for his familiar baritone, even if it came sharp, even if it came disappointed. I wanted something. Anything. The line clicked, but not to voicemail. Just silence. Dead air, the kind that leaves no trace. I pulled the phone back and set it gently beside the printer. The machine was alive, grinding out page after page of crisp white paper, the ink still damp. The scent of toner clung to the air. Each page carried my name that they had tried to scrub from record, my name that they had tried to bury under legal maneuvers and forged signatures. I stared at the stack, neat and growing, a monument to the truth they thought they had erased. This wasn't theater. This wasn't some dramatic stunt. This was strategy, deliberate and precise. Astria sat across from me, legs crossed, her dark suit sharp against the dim light. Her posture was composed, her expression carved in calm. She didn't smile, didn't congratulate me. Instead, she watched, her eyes following my hands as I flipped through the documents, incorporation certificates, internal memos, amended shareholder agreements, email archives, bank slips, file access logs. Each one linked back to me, a trail of breadcrumbs I had safeguarded for years without realizing they'd become my salvation. They buried me in paperwork, I murmured, voice low but steady, fingertips grazing a page stamped with my initials. But I'll resurrect myself through it. Astria leaned in, her lips pressing into a thin line. They'll try to spin it, she said. Leaked emails, smear campaigns, psychological angles. They'll paint you as unstable, as bitter, as jealous. But paper doesn't lie. And a silent strike with proper signatures and verifiable trails? They won't be ready. Her voice was clinical, but beneath it pulsed a certainty that steadied me. She slid a printed checklist across the table. It listed dates, times, metadata trails, server access logs, digital backups, invoices. We traced them together, line by line, her pen tapping each like a general reviewing troop movements before battle. Everything matched. The legality was clean, the truth undeniable. A hush fell between us, not the hush of fear, but of inevitability. I felt it in my stomach, a tight coil of anticipation. The shallow pull of my breath told me we were no longer at the edge of conflict. We were in it. This was not prelude. This was the strike. My gaze shifted to the jewelry box sitting on the corner shelf. Inside it lay the necklace, thin chain, delicate pendant, that Dorian had once clasped around my neck, the so-called spirit of the family heirloom. My throat tightened as I picked it up. The pendant glimmered in the lamplight, a shard of loyalty-turned weapon. I held it in my palm, felt its weight, and realized it no longer felt like protection. It felt like a noose. Memories surged. My 25th birthday, the backyard strung with lights, family and friends circling, and Dorian holding the necklace aloft. "You're the spirit of this family," he'd said, fastening it around my neck. I'd believed him, believed that meant something. Tonight, those words mocked me. I wrapped the necklace carefully in tissue paper, my hands steady despite the storm inside me. I slid it into a plain envelope. On the front, in clean black ink, I wrote a single word: return. That word felt heavier than any threat I could craft. I tucked the envelope into my clutch, pressed the flap shut, and rose. Astria watched me but said nothing. She didn't need to. She knew what this was, not anger, but severance. Outside, the suburban street was quiet under the orange wash of lamplight. The courier drop-box stood across the road, its metal face glistening from earlier rain. My heels struck the pavement with rhythmic certainty as I approached. I lifted the flap, dropped the envelope inside, and listened to it fall. The sound was soft, final, irreversible. I exhaled, my breath fogging in the cool night air. The street was empty, but it felt like witnesses stood everywhere, in the shadows, in the silent windows, in the stars themselves. And walking back toward my apartment, I felt the pavement hum beneath each step. My shoulders squared, my pulse slowed. The necklace was gone, the lie returned to its source. My father could keep his heirloom, his performance of pride. I would keep the truth. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't about destruction. I wasn't chasing bitterness or blood. I was reclaiming what had been mine all along. I whispered it aloud, letting the night carry it. This is reclamation. I will rewrite the ledger. They responded quickly, and louder than I ever could have imagined. By the time the first shards of dawn crept through the blinds of my apartment, the world outside already hummed with the sound of their panic. I flipped open my laptop, half expecting routine silence, only to be met with a storm of notifications. My inbox overflowed with alerts from industry outlets, news feeds, and social media trackers. Sponsorships, gone. Brand partnerships that had once paraded Callista's face across glossy magazines, suspended indefinitely. Corporate accounts issued bland but devastating statements. Pending clarification. In light of recent revelations, we cannot stand behind dishonesty. Influencers who once toasted her name on Instagram stories now posted videos saying, "I can't stand with lies." The suit I filed less than 48 hours before had detonated like a bomb in the heart of their empire. It was everywhere, front-page fodder for business sections, trending hashtags in corners of the internet I hadn't touched in years. Axios, TechCrunch, Forbes, all running the same headline in some variation. Youngest daughter challenges billion-dollar family lie. My pulse rattled as I scrolled, the words blurring but cutting all the same. Vindication throbbed like a drumbeat inside me, but so did dread, because this wasn't a fight in shadows anymore. This was war under a floodlight. Astria sat across from me, calm as ever, her black hair drawn back neatly, her pen tapping rhythmically against the binder she'd brought. She didn't gloat, she didn't grin. She leaned toward me as I scanned the latest article and said, with her voice barely above a whisper, "This is working. They're feeling cornered." She was right. The cracks were visible. Callista's carefully curated empire had begun to buckle overnight. Her skincare conglomerate, worth millions in annual revenue, issued a terse press release that morning, pausing all collaboration until clarification regarding authorship and intellectual contributions could be resolved. Her fashion label's once vibrant Instagram account began bleeding followers, tens of thousands gone in hours. Viral threads dissected her every speech, every claim, every appearance at industry summits. A resurfaced clip from that technology conference just months ago spread like wildfire. Callista, smiling, claiming credit for the M-line strategy in front of an applauding crowd. The comments beneath were brutal, unrelenting. So she stole something she never built? Can we trust a single word out of her mouth? Another case of erasing the real worker while the face cashes in. By mid-afternoon, her PR agent, the woman who had polished every press release and taught Callista how to parry hard questions, resigned in public with a one-sentence statement. "I cannot continue to represent a narrative built on deception." The spin doctors scattered. I watched the fallout from my window, city lights bending into a watercolor blur through the mist. Cars moved below, oblivious to the fact that an empire was cracking in the towers overhead. I pressed my palms flat against the cool glass and whispered to myself, "They can't erase what's already proven." Then came the shock that no strategy could predict. A breaking news alert flashed red across my screen. Dorian Carter, patriarch of the family, had collapsed during a live interview on a conservative business network. I clicked instantly. The video played, grainy, rushed, captured mid-broadcast. Dorian sat in a leather chair, speaking with his usual bombast about legacy and control. Then, suddenly, his words slurred. His face drained of color. A hand clutched his chest. He slumped sideways. The anchor froze before the network cut hastily to commercial. I sat frozen, watching the 30-second clip loop again. My chest twisted violently. That man, my father, the architect of both our empire and my erasure, looked frail, mortal. For years, he had gripped this family like a fist around sand. Now, I watched the fist unclench live on television. My phone rang within minutes. Meliora, my mother. I let it buzz twice before answering. When I did, her voice was small, trembling, as though she had aged a decade in a single hour. "He's in the hospital," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." There was a pause. A canyon opened between us, filled with years of silence, complicity, betrayal. Finally, I said what steadied itself in my throat. "I'm sorry too, but that's between him and karma." She breathed once, as if to protest, then let the line fall dead. I sat there, staring at the dark horizon through my window. Street lamps dripped light onto slick pavement. The city pulsed, indifferent to the collapse of a dynasty. And I realized, the fight was no longer whispered at dinner tables, no longer hidden in email chains or locked boardrooms. It was public now, a war waged not behind curtains, but on open stages. The following morning broke gray and sharp. By the time I arrived at the courthouse, camera flashes assaulted me like sheets of rain. Reporters shouted my name, shouted Callista's, shouted Dorian's. They wanted sound bites. They wanted scandal. They wanted to crown someone guilty before the trial even began. I walked up the courthouse steps, shoulders square, Astria at my side. The binder of evidence weighed in my bag like a second heartbeat. I raised my hand, palm open, stopping their questions mid-scream. "This isn't about revenge," I said, voice calm but firm, each syllable slicing through the noise. "This is about truth." And without waiting for another word, I turned, pushed the heavy courthouse doors open, and walked inside. They took my words seriously. Now I stood in the courtroom, where they never expected me to be. The morning air outside the courthouse was thick with heat and humidity, crowd noise, camera shutters. I stepped through tall wooden doors, adjusting the seam of my blazer, heart steady, mind sharpened. The courtroom smelled of polished wood, fresh air conditioning, and tension. Dorian sat flanked by attorneys, his face a mask of strained control. He avoided looking at me, his eyes drifted to the ceiling. Callista's counsel sat rigid, glancing once at me, once at his notes, as though uncertain whether we were adversaries or family in a tragic play. The silence between us was louder than any accusation. Astria stood before the bench, upright and composed. She said to the judge, "Your Honor, we move to submit a new piece of evidence." With that phrase, I felt the ground shift under their feet. Drinks clanked as the bailiff plugged a flash drive into the courtroom computer. The screen flickered. The room held its breath. On screen, a grainy video played. A former accountant, voice shaking, spoke. "Callista asked me to delete Ophelia's share record. I can't let it stay. She said it was better for the brand." The judge leaned forward. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Callista's face paled. Her attorney's jaw slackened. Dorian coughed. He muttered something unintelligible. Callista stared at me with an expression I'd never seen. Shock, betrayal, fear. I stood then, approached the stand. My pulse did not betray me. I swore the oath. I sat. I looked at the jury, at these strangers entrusted with justice, at my mother in the front row, who'd come, trembling. I inhaled. I said, slowly but clearly, "I built something from nothing. They tried to bury it. I'm not here for money. I'm here because I matter." Silence fell. So complete, I felt every heartbeat. In a corner, I saw a jury member dab at her eye. The entire courtroom paused. Callista opened her mouth, closed it. Her attorney whispered. Dorian's face drained red to ash. The judge tapped his gavel. He said, "The court will recess and reconvene for final decision." We rose. Reporters hoisted microphones. Flashes exploded in the hallway. I stepped out into the corridor. A reporter shouted, "Miss Carter, your statement?" I held eye contact, voice firm. No matter what they say, I finally spoke. And then I walked past the cameras, unbroken. I stepped out of the courthouse feeling light, though every nerve hummed with exhaustion. The verdict reached at dawn had shifted something fundamental. 2 weeks later now, I sat in a quiet neighborhood coffee shop, the hum of espresso machines and murmured conversations a soft counterpoint to my still mind. The morning light slanted across wood tables, dust motes dancing in the rays. After the hearing, the judge granted me partial ownership of the company, restored my rights to my intellectual property, and mandated a public acknowledgement of my contribution. Callista faced no jail term, but her reputation was deeply wounded. And Dorian? He never appeared in court. He stayed away, refusing the confrontation he'd orchestrated for so long. I signed the lease for a modest innovation lab that same afternoon. No scandal, no grand announcement. Just me stepping into a space that bore my name and vision. The walls were bare when I moved in. I placed on my desk a childhood photo. Me, age 8 or 9, holding a rudimentary prototype I'd built from scrap. It reminded me I had been a builder long before being silenced. A courier dropped off a small package by noon. Inside was a folded, handwritten letter. I don't expect forgiveness. Just wanted you to know. I knew you were right. I just wasn't brave enough to say it. Mom. It carried no return address. My heart clenched. I read it twice before I could believe she had written it. The weight of all silences between us made every word tremble. I folded the letter, set it beside my photo, and paused. The room smelled like fresh paint, clean linen, possibility. I felt something like peace. Later, I met Astria for brunch at a cozy cafe with checkered tablecloths and sunlight spilling across windows. We shared croissants and coffee. We laughed. She asked, "What now?" I smiled, soft, real. I reclaim what they couldn't steal, my voice. She nodded, satisfaction in her eyes. Afterwards, I walked home through quiet streets, headphones in, music low and steady. I narrated in my head. I wasn't the forgotten daughter. I was the foundation. And when they tried to bury me, they forgot I was a seed. I smiled gently as the breeze carried me forward. The silence around me was no longer absence, it was space to grow. What this story reminds us is simple, that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who cause the deepest wounds. But healing doesn't always come from their apology. Sometimes it comes from standing your ground, reclaiming your voice, and choosing yourself, even when it means walking alone. Have you ever had to walk away from family to protect your peace? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe. There's more to come, and every voice matters here.